There are two moments. A father never forgets the day his daughter is born, and the day he gives her away. For me, that second moment never came. Instead, just before I was supposed to walk her down the aisle, my own daughter told me to get out of her wedding. A wedding I had poured 147,000 into. She thought I would crumble. She didn't realize she had just handed me the receipt for her destruction. This is a story about a line being crossed. If you believe respect is a two-way street, make sure you're subscribed. The tie felt like a polite noose. I adjusted it in the hall mirror. The silk cool and unfamiliar against my skin. It was a Tom Ford. Something Chloe had insisted on. You have to look the part. Dad, she'd said, not looking up from her phone. I wasn't sure what part I was supposed to be playing, other than the one I'd played for the last 25 years, the provider. The rock. The ever-present, silent benefactor of her life. My reflection looked tired. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper today, etched not just by 55 years of living, but by 25 years of living for two. I saw my wife, Maria. In the faint smile I tried to muster. It was her smile. She'd been gone for so long, but on days like this, her absence was a physical presence. A hollow space beside me where she should have been. Her hand in mine. Her eyes sparkling with the same pride that was trying to find its way through my own exhaustion. You'll take care of our girl, won't you, Glenn? It was the last thing she ever asked of me. And I had. Oh, God. I had. My gaze drifted past my own shoulder, into the reflection of my home office, just down the hall. In the corner stood an old Wadi Harris station. 4-drawer metal filing cabinet. It was dented, and the paint was chipped. A relic from my first accounting business. My friends joked that I should get rid of it. But to me, it was a monument. A monument to my promise. Inside, meticulously organized, were the receipts of a lifetime dedicated to Chloe. I could feel the weight of those files just looking at the cabinet. I remembered one winter. Chloe was maybe 9, and she came down with a nasty case of pneumonia. Susan from accounting, a lovely woman I'd been thinking of asking out, had invited me to a Christmas party. I'd bought a new shirt for it, but Chloe's fever spiked. I spent that night, and the next 3, sleeping on a chair by her bed, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. My new shirt still in its box. Susan eventually married someone else. I never regretted it. Then there were the late nights. Years of them. Hunched over tax returns and corporate audits until my vision blurred and the coffee tasted like ash. Those nights paid for her summer trip to Europe after high school. The one where she sent postcards from Paris and Rome, oblivious to the fact that her father was eating leftover takeout for the 3rd night in a row to make it happen. They paid for the down payment on her first condo. A place far nicer than my own. And college. I remember signing the last tuition check for her liberal arts degree from that private East Coast university. The figure had so many zeros, it looked more like a phone number. Subaisumayuan. Ling. All told, the day she graduated, seeing her walk across that stage in her cap and gown, I felt a pride so fierce it almost knocked the wind out of me. It was all worth it. Every sacrificed evening, every missed opportunity, every lonely holiday. It was all for her. A car horn honked outside, pulling me back to the present, the limousine. Time to go. I gave the tie one last tug, grabbed my keys, and walked out of the house, leaving the filing cabinet to stand sentinel in the quiet office. The wedding venue was something out of a magazine. A sprawling Long Island estate with manicured gardens, marble fountains, and a ballroom that could have hosted royalty. As I stepped out of the car, the air smelled thick and sweet, with the scent of thousands of imported Ecuadorian roses and lilies. A scent that I knew cost more than my first car. The faint, smooth notes of a live jazz band, warming up, drifted from the terrace. Everything was perfect. Every single, ridiculously expensive detail I had paid for was in its place. I saw her standing near the entrance. Eleanor Harrison, Brandon's mother. She was tall and thin, dressed in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost a month's mortgage. She held a glass of what was undoubtedly very expensive champagne, her fingers wrapped around the stem as if she were born holding it. She watched me approach, a smile playing on her lips that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Glenn," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "So glad you could make it." "Eleanor, the place looks incredible." She took a slow sip of her drink, her eyes scanning my Tom Ford suit. The suit her future daughter-in-law had picked out for me. "It does, doesn't it? We wanted everything to be perfect for Chloe's special day." The "we" hung in the air. "A deliberate." Dismissive little cloud. She gestured vaguely at my suit. "It's lovely that you tried. Glenn, you clean up nicely." Before I could formulate a reply that was both civil and satisfying, she'd already turned away to greet another guest, leaving me standing there feeling like I'd just been inspected and found wanting. I shook off the feeling. This day wasn't about her. It was about Chloe. I found the bridal suite at the end of a long, sunlit corridor. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear laughter inside. I knocked gently. "Come in." I pushed the door open. The room was a flurry of silk and hairspray. And there, in the center of it all, was my daughter, Chloe. She was breathtaking. The $12,000 dress I'd written the check for hugged her form perfectly, and the veil cascaded down her back like a waterfall. For a moment, she looked exactly like her mother. "Honey, you look just like your mom," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. She glanced at me in the mirror, then immediately looked down at her phone, her thumb swiping furiously. "Thanks. Dad, do you think the lighting in here is too yellow?" I told them I wanted warm white. "This is going to ruin the photographer's shots." I stood there for a moment, waiting for her to look at me, to really see me. But her attention was already gone, lost in the digital glow of her screen. One of her bridesmaids handed her a glass of champagne, and she took it without a word of thanks. The moment passed, and I was just another piece of furniture in the room. Finally, it was time. The music coordinator gave the 5-minute signal. My heart started to beat a little faster. A nervous, excited rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The moment I'd been picturing for 25 years. I would take my daughter's arm, walk her down that long aisle through a sea of faces, and give her away. A final act of love and letting go. I walked over to her as the bridesmaids began to file out. She stood up, smoothing the front of her dress. She was beautiful, an absolute vision. "Ready, sweetheart?" I asked, extending my arm. She looked at my arm, then up at my face. Her expression was unreadable. A cool, placid mask. Brandon and his mother, Eleanor, had appeared in the doorway behind her. Silent observers. Chloe took a small step back. away from my outstretched arm. "Actually, Dad," she said. Her voice was a whisper, but it cut through the air like a shard of ice. "Brandon's father will be walking me down the aisle." The world seemed to slow down. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I must have misheard her. "What?" It looks better for the family," she continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "The Harrisons. You know, it presents a more unified front." She finally looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw nothing. No apology. No regret. Just a chilling, transactional indifference. "We'd prefer if you just left quietly now." I stared at her, speechless. My mind was a roaring vacuum. I looked past her to the doorway. Brandon stood there, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. Eleanor was watching me with a look of cool satisfaction. This was their doing. They had orchestrated this. But Chloe had allowed it. She had swung the axe. A hand landed gently on my shoulder. I turned to see a burly man in a black suit, the security I'd paid for. He had a pained look on his face. "Sir," he mumbled, his voice low and apologetic. She asked you to leave." I didn't fight. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. I looked at my daughter one last time. My perfect, beautiful daughter, standing there in her perfect dress, in her perfect wedding venue. She turned away, adjusting her veil in the mirror, as if I were already gone. I nodded once to the security guard, turned, and walked away, down the long, sunlit corridor, past the smiling, oblivious guests. Each step was a hammer blow, shattering the foundation of the life I had so carefully built for her. As I reached the main doors, the jazz band swelled into the opening notes of the bridal march. Her song, the song that was supposed to be our cue. I pushed the heavy oak doors open and stepped out into the afternoon sun, the sound of my daughter's wedding fading behind me. I walked across the sprawling gravel lot, my expensive shoes crunching with every agonizing step. I got into my car, the leather seat still warm from the sun. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the magnificent building I was no longer welcome in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with a picture of her, smiling. The caller ID read Chloe. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then, I took a long, slow breath. The shock was starting to recede, the searing pain in my chest hardening into something cold, and heavy, and sharp. A terrifying calm washed over me. I knew exactly what I had to do next. The drive home was a blur of muted colors and silent motion. The world outside my windshield seemed distant. A movie playing on a screen I wasn't watching. The engine hummed its steady, indifferent tune. There were no tears. The searing wound in my chest had been cauterized by a cold, clarifying rage. The grief was still there, a leaden weight in the pit of my stomach. But it was no longer the pilot. Calculation was. 25 years of love and sacrifice had been dismissed in a single, cruel sentence. A transaction. Very well. I could be transactional. 2. I pulled into my driveway. The house dark and quiet. It didn't feel like home. It felt like a staging ground, a headquarters. I didn't turn on the living room lights or check the mail. I walked straight down the hall to my office. The sound of my dress shoes sharp and purposeful on the hardwood floors. I flipped on the single green glass banker's lamp on my desk. casting a pool of focused light in the otherwise dark room. My eyes went immediately to the old four-drawer filing cabinet in the corner. My war room. My archive. My testament. The metal drawer protested with a long, metallic screech as I pulled it open. The smell of old paper and ink filled the air. It was the smell of my life's work. My fingers, steady and sure, moved past folders labeled mortgage, taxes, utilities. I was looking for a different kind of investment. I found them, neatly tabbed and organized by year. Chloe, car. Chloe, college. Chloe, condo down payment. And finally, the thickest one of all, Chloe, wedding dot. I lifted the hefty folder and placed it squarely in the center of my desk lamp's glow. I untied the string and opened it. The document sat there, a silent, damning stack of evidence. The venue contract, with its absurdly long list of addendums for everything from valet parking to ice sculptures. The catering agreement, detailing a 5-course meal for 200 people, complete with a champagne fountain. And the invoices. God. The invoices. A $75. 000 charge from the estate. A $40. 000 bill for the food and drink. A $22. 000 wire transfer to a floral designer in New York who specialized in sourcing rare Ecuadorian roses. Each number was a monument to my indulgence. My foolish, boundless love. My gaze fell on the small, silver-framed photo on the corner of my desk. It was Maria, taken on our last anniversary. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her eyes full of a light that I had tried so hard to keep alive in her daughter. I promised to protect her. Maria. I whispered into the quiet room, my fingers tracing the edge of the frame, and I did. But I think I forgot. I also had to teach her. A promise, I realized, isn't just about giving. It's also about building character. I had built her a palace, but I'd forgotten to teach her how to be its queen. I had to draw a line, not out of spite, but out of a desperate, last-ditch effort to salvage the woman she was supposed to become. My moral compass was clear. I would not touch a single thing that wasn't mine. I would only reclaim what I had given. With a newfound resolve, I sat down in my leather office chair. I pulled my phone and the wedding folder closer. My first call was to the venue. A man named Arthur, the estate's general manager, answered on the third ring, his voice professionally cheerful. Good evening. Crestwood Manor. Arthur speaking. My voice was calm, level, and devoid of any emotion. It was the voice I used for negotiating multi-million-dollar corporate audits. Hello, Arthur. This is Glenn Clark. I am the signatory on the Clark-Harrison wedding contract for this evening. Event number 74B. Mr. Clark, yes. Of course. I hope everything is to your satisfaction. Sir. Not entirely. I said coolly. I am calling to inform you that PER, Section 7B of our signed agreement regarding final payment authorization. I am officially withholding that authorization. The event is to be terminated immediately. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of the jazz band playing in the background. Not for long. Sir, I don't understand. The event is in progress. I understand that perfectly, I replied, my voice like ice. And my payment, which constitutes the entirety of your fee, is being withheld. You are contractually obligated to cease services upon this notification. I suggest you do so before my next call is to my credit card company to dispute the initial deposit on the grounds of breach of contract. More silence. I heard him shuffling papers, his breathing growing heavier. He knew I was right. I was the one with the signature on the bottom line. I was the one with the power. Very well. Mr. Clark, he finally said, his voice strained and formal. We will comply. Thank you, Arthur, I said, and hung up. One by one, the pillars of her perfect day were dismantled with the same surgical precision. A call to the catering manager, who was a contractor to the venue and had no choice but to follow their lead. A call to the florist, whose final bill was due upon completion of the event, an event that was no longer being completed. A call to the band leader, a man I'd spoken to personally about playing a waltz Maria had loved. Each call was short, professional, and final. When I was done, I placed the phone face down on the desk, and I waited. Within minutes, it began to buzz. A text from Chloe Dad. What is happening? The manager is talking about payments. Call me now. I ignored it. The phone buzzed again. A call. Her face smiling from the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go. A text immediately followed. This is Brandon. What the hell did you do? You are ruining everything. I deleted the text without replying. Then a call from Eleanor Harrison. I almost answered that one, just to hear the venom in her voice. But I didn't. Silence was my weapon. I sat there in the glow of my desk lamp, the house as quiet as a tomb, while my phone buzzed and lit up with a frantic dispiriting energy. I imagined the scene, the hushed, urgent whispers of the manager, the music stopping mid-song, the catering staff emerging from the kitchen, not with silver platters of hors d'oeuvres, but with rolling carts to clear away the uneaten feast. I imagined the confusion on the guests' faces turning to embarrassment. I imagined Chloe's perfect, beautiful face contorting in panic. Then disbelief. Then pure, undiluted rage. And for the first time that day, I felt something other than pain. It was the cold, satisfying click of a lock falling into place. The next morning, I woke to the smell of brewing coffee. The house was still quiet, the frantic calls having died down sometime in the early hours. For a moment, it felt like any other day. Then I remembered. I poured myself a mug of black coffee and sat down at my laptop. I knew it was coming, but I needed to see it for myself. And there it was. Chloe had posted on every social media platform she had. It was a long, rambling post, accompanied by a professionally taken photo of her looking angelic in her wedding dress. She wrote about her narcissistic plate, controlling father who couldn't stand that the day wasn't about him. She claimed I had thrown a tantrum over a minor seating arrangement and, in an act of petty revenge, had called and canceled everything, humiliating her in front of everyone she had ever known. She painted herself as the tragic victim of a bitter old man's cruelty. The comments poured in, a torrent of sympathy and outrage directed at me. What a monster, one read. Chloe, you are so strong. We love you, said another. Brandon and his friends were all over the comment section, adding details, stoking the flames, calling me every name in the book. It was a masterfully executed smear campaign. Just as I was reading a particularly vile comment from one of her bridesmaids, my phone rang. It was my sister-in-law, Carol, Maria's younger sister. I answered. Glenn, "What on earth did you do?" she demanded without preamble. "My phone has been ringing off the hook. You ruined your own daughter's wedding. You made a public spectacle of our family." "Carol," I said, my voice even. "You've only heard her side of it." "What other side is there?" she cried. "She's your daughter. You're supposed to love her unconditionally." "I do," I said quietly. "But love and a blank check are two different things." I ended the call before she could reply. My hand was shaking slightly. But my resolve was harder than ever. They wanted to have this fight in public. So be it. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my office. The hum of my desktop scanner was the only sound. One by one, I fed it the evidence. The final tuition statement from her university, showing a balance paid in full of $410. Ling. The wire transfer confirmation for the $50,000 down payment on her condo. The credit card statement showing the $12 $2,000 charge for Annette's bridal couture. Page after page. I scanned, saved, and organized. I compiled them all into a single PDF file, each page annotated with a simple, factual description. It was a financial biography of my daughter's life, written by me. As evening fell, I opened up my laptop again. I navigated to Chloe's post. It had gone viral. Thousands of likes, hundreds of shares, a waterfall of comments condemning me. My name was being dragged through the digital mud. I took a sip of my now cold coffee. I located the file on my desktop, Chloe, the full story. PDF. I took a deep breath, the air feeling heavy in my lungs. My cursor hovered over the comment box below her tear-stained narrative. I was about to drop a nuclear bomb on her carefully constructed world. I paused, my finger resting on the mouse, the weight of 25 years behind that single, impending click. My finger rested on the mouse, a single point of pressure separating two entirely different futures. In one, I was the silent, maligned villain of my daughter's story. In the other, the story would no longer be hers to tell. The silence in my office was absolute, a holding of breath. I clicked. The upload bar filled in a fraction of a second. The comment appeared. My words, plain and unadorned, sat beneath her dramatic tale of victimhood. Chloe, I had written, since you decided to make our private family matter public, I feel compelled to provide the public with the full context. Attached are the financial records of my abuse and control over the past 25 years. And there it was, a small, clickable link with the file name Chloe, the full story, PDF. For a full minute, nothing happened. My comment was just one among thousands. A single drop in an ocean of her supporters' outrage. I watched the screen, my coffee cold and forgotten beside me. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing the actions of another man. The rage that had driven me here had cooled, leaving behind only a stark, unwavering clarity. The die was cast. Then, a single notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Someone had liked my comment. Then another. A reply appeared. What is this? A second reply. And a minute later. Whoa. Wait a second. I'm opening the PDF. And then, the dam broke. It started as a trickle. A few more likes. A few more replies. Then the trickle became a stream. The stream, a river. The river, a flood. My notifications began to chime in a frantic, non-stop rhythm. A digital hailstorm. I had to mute my computer to stop the noise. People weren't just reading the comment anymore. They were reading the file. And they were reacting. The entire tone of the comment section began to shift. In real time. Right before my eyes. The initial wave of sympathy for Chloe crashed against the hard, undeniable facts I had presented. Holy cow. Did anyone else see page 14, $410? 000 for college, that's not abuse. That's a winning lottery ticket. I'm looking at the credit card statement for the wedding dress. $12,000. And she kicked him out. Forget the wedding. He paid the down payment on her condo. My parents gave me a toaster oven when I moved out. The tide was turning with breathtaking speed. Her supporters grew quiet, replaced by a new, much louder chorus of disbelief and indignation. The narrative was being ripped from her hands. People started taking screenshots of my comment and the PDF's contents, reposting them everywhere. The fire was spreading beyond her control. Suddenly, my comment vanished. I refreshed the page. It was gone. She or Brandon had deleted it. A small, desperate act of censorship, but it was like trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. A new post appeared on her page a few minutes later. It was from Brandon. My wife's estranged father has posted fake and doctored documents in an attempt to harass her. We are exploring our legal options. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time. Fake. It was a pathetic, predictable move, and I was ready for it. I didn't bother commenting on their new post. I simply went to my own social media page, which I hadn't touched in years. I uploaded the PDF again, and I wrote a single, calm sentence above it. The originals are with my lawyer. Feel free to dispute them. It was a bluff. Of course. My lawyer was a guy named Herb who handled my corporate taxes and knew nothing of this, but the effect was immediate and devastating. The word lawyer changed everything. It added a weight of authenticity that no denial could overcome. My post exploded. It was shared hundreds, then thousands of times. The hashtag started by a random commenter number, Pay Your Own Wedding, began to trend in our city. The story was no longer just social media drama. A local news blogger wrote a piece titled, Father of the Bride, or Walking ATM, a local wedding story goes viral. They embedded screenshots of my PDF. My phone started ringing with numbers I didn't recognize reporters. I assumed. I ignored them all. Late that night, as I was staring at the ceiling in my dark bedroom, my phone rang. The caller ID was Eleanor Harrison. This was the call I'd been waiting for. I let it ring twice, then answered, putting it on speakerphone and placing it on the nightstand. Glenn. She hissed. There was no preamble, no pretense of civility. Her voice was pure venom. What in God's name do you think you're doing? You are dragging my family's name through the mud. You are destroying my son's reputation. I remained silent, letting her rage fill the space. This is an unconscionable, vile attack on a young couple just starting their lives, she shrieked. You will take that post down immediately. Or I swear to you, our lawyers will bury you so deep. Your lawyers, I interrupted, my voice quiet, but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel. By all means. Eleanor. Send them over. I'm sure they'd be very interested in the full, unredacted financial records I have. I'm sure they'd love to see where all the money for Brandon's last business venture actually came from. It was a complete shot in the dark. A guess based on the entitled way Brandon spent money that wasn't his. The silence on the other end was sudden and absolute. It was so complete I thought she might have hung up. I had hit a nerve. A big one. You stay away from my son. She finally whispered, her voice stripped of its fury, replaced now with something else. Fear. You tell your son to stay away from my daughter's inheritance. I replied, and you tell him that the bill for the wedding photographer, the officiant, and the non-refundable portion of the honeymoon is now his responsibility. Goodbye. Eleanor. I hung up before she could respond. I had won. Not every call was so satisfying. The next afternoon, my cousin Roger called. He was a decent man, but one who prized family harmony above all else. Glenn. It's Roger. Listen. I saw the stuff online. It's a mess. He sounded pained. I'm not taking sides. But do you really think it was right to air all our family's dirty laundry in public like that? Some things should stay private. For a moment, a flicker of shame hit me. He was right. In a way, I had made a spectacle of our lives. But then I remembered the cold, dismissive look in Chloe's eyes, the security guard's hand on my shoulder when one side decides to go public with lies. Roger, I said, my voice weary but firm. The only defense is to go public with the truth. The real consequences began to cascade quickly after that. Through the family grapevine, I heard that Chloe's maid of honor had called her, screaming that her own social media was being flooded with hateful comments just for being associated with the wedding. Several of Chloe's friends quietly unfollowed her. The vendors, seeing the public posts and realizing I was no longer the paying party, started calling Chloe and Brandon directly, demanding the remaining balances on their contracts. The perfect dream had turned into a nightmare of debt and collection calls. The most satisfying news came a few days later. From my sister-in-law, Carol, the same one who had admonished me. Her tone was completely different now. She spoke in a hushed, gossipy whisper. You are not going to believe this. Glenn, Eleanor and Brandon had a screaming match. Someone who knows their caterer heard the whole thing. She found out Brandon used a chunk of the money she gave them for a house down payment to invest in some crypto scam. It's all gone. She called Chloe a gold-digging parasite and told Brandon he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The alliance, built on a foundation of my money and their social climbing, had crumbled the moment the money was gone. Chloe was no longer a prize to be won. She was a liability, a walking, talking embodiment of bad press and bad debt. I felt a grim sense of finality. It was over. The truth was out, and the dominoes had all fallen. I had expected to feel a sense of triumph, of victory. Instead, he just felt empty. It was the quiet emptiness of a battlefield after the fighting is done. That evening, my phone rang again. It was Brandon. I answered. I heard him take a ragged breath, the sound distorted by the phone. He wasn't yelling. His voice was eerily quiet, trembling with a defeated rage. You've ruined everything, he whispered. Everything. It's over. This marriage is over. Come and get your daughter. He hung up. I stared at the phone, the silence of the room pressing in on me. He wasn't asking. He was abandoning her. My daughter, who had so callously discarded me, had now been discarded herself. And in the wreckage of her perfect life, there was only one person left for her to call. The click of the disconnected call was a punctuation mark at the end of a long, ugly chapter. It resonated in the profound silence of my house, a silence that had become my constant companion. I stood there in the semi-darkness of my living room, the phone still warm in my hand. Brandon's final words, stripped of their usual arrogance and laced with a pathetic, defeated venom, echoed not just in the room, but in the hollow spaces of my own chest. Come and get your daughter. It was a command born of cowardice. He wasn't just ending their sham of a marriage, he was renouncing her existence, washing his hands of the mess he had helped create. The great Harrison name, the prize for which Chloe had traded her father's love, had cast her out the moment. The accounts ran dry, and the social currency turned toxic. The days that followed were thick and heavy. Like moving through water, the viral storm had, as all such storms do, blown itself out. Moving on to new dramas. New villains. My name was no longer a trending hashtag, but the wreckage remained. I tried to fall back into the rhythm of my life, but the rhythm was gone. I'd wake up, make coffee that tasted like bitter ash, and stare out the kitchen window at a world that seemed to be moving on without me. The house, once a sanctuary I had built for her, now felt like a mausoleum of memories. Every empty room seemed to echo with a different version of her laughter from years gone by. There was no sense of victory. None of the righteous satisfaction I had anticipated. Revenge, I was discovering, is a dish best served cold, but its aftertaste is loneliness. I received updates in sporadic, hushed phone calls from my sister-in-law, Carol. Her tone had shifted dramatically from shrill condemnation to a kind of morbid, gossipy fascination. She was my unwilling window into the collapse of Chloe's world. "Glenn, you won't believe it," she said one afternoon. Her voice, a conspiratorial whisper. "Brandon filed for an annulment. He's claiming fraud." The word dripped with disgust. "He's telling everyone she misrepresented herself, that she pretended to have a family trust that doesn't exist. It's a complete lie. But his family's lawyers are sharks. They'll probably get it." A few days later, another call. "Somebody I know lives in their old building. They saw Chloe there yesterday. Trying to get her things, Brandon wouldn't even open the door. Glenn, he had the concierge bring down a single cardboard box of her personal effects. A single box. The rest. He told the concierge to inform her that her belongings were being held pending a settlement for her half of the wedding vendor debts." Each piece of news was a small, sharp jab to my heart. He was systematically dismantling her, piece by piece, with the same cold precision I had used on her wedding day. The irony was not lost on me. I learned that the Harrisons had changed the locks on the condo I had helped buy, and that her friends, Brandon's friends, really were now actively avoiding her calls, treating her like a social contagion. She was adrift in a sea of consequences, and for the first time in her 25 years of privileged existence, she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. I waited. The silence from her was a heavy blanket. Every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number, my stomach would clench. Was this it, but days turned into a week? Part of me, a small, dark part, wondered if her pride was so absolute that she would rather live out of her car, the car I paid for, than make that final, humiliating call. The thought brought me a fresh wave of sorrow. What had I created a daughter whose pride was more valuable than her own survival? Then, one evening, nearly 2 weeks after Brandon's call, it happened. I was in my office, the source of it all, staring at the filing cabinet that stood like a silent monolith in the corner. My phone vibrated on the polished wood of the desk, the sound jarring in the stillness. An unknown number. I took a breath, letting the air fill my lungs, and answered, putting the call on speaker. "Hello." The only response for a long moment was a shaky, hitching intake of breath. The sound of someone trying to speak through a throat constricted by tears. It was a sound of pure desperation, Then, a voice. So thin and fragile, I almost didn't recognize it as my daughter's. Dad, it was barely a whisper. A question posed to the universe, hoping for an answer, but expecting none. 1,000 possible responses flooded my mind. From a cold. What do you want to a warm? I'm here. I settled on the simple truth. I'm here. Chloe. That was all it took. A dam of composure broke within her. And a sob, raw and wrenching, tore from her lungs. Dad, I'm so sorry. The words were a ragged, broken torrent. I was so stupid. I was horrible. I messed everything up. I messed us up. I listened to them. Dad, to Eleanor and Brandon. I thought that was the life I was supposed to have. The fancy parties. The name. I threw everything away for a name. And now I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. Everyone's gone. I let her speak. My eyes closed. My fingers steepled on the desk. I listened past the words. To the melody of her pain. I had heard apologies from her my entire life. The apology for crashing the BMW at 17 had been laced with excuses about a slippery road. The apology for maxing out the credit card in Paris had been a breezy, dramatic performance of contrition that lasted just long enough for me to pay the bill. This was different. This wasn't a performance. This was the sound of a soul being stripped bare. The arrogance had been pulverized. The entitlement had been burned away. All that was left was the terrified, remorseful child I hadn't heard from in over a decade. For the first time, it wasn't the regret of being caught in a lie, it was the agony of finally understanding the truth. In that moment, a profound shift occurred within me. The last embers of my cold, hard anger simply winked out. They weren't replaced by a triumphant blaze of victory, but by a quiet, aching peace. It was the calm that follows a devastating storm. The war was over. The damage was done. And now came the task of surveying the wreckage. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and it felt like I was exhaling weeks of tension, resentment, and the heavy burden of my own righteous fury. She was my daughter, and she was broken. "Where are you?" "Chloe," I asked, my voice softer than I'd intended. "A motel." She stammered, the words punctuated by sniffles. "Someplace off the highway." The credit card you co-signed for me. They cut it up. The manager was so mean about it. Of course it was declined. I had called the bank and removed my name from the account the day after my post went viral. One last, untied string. This was the crossroads. The easy path lay before me, wide and inviting. I could say the 3 words she was desperate to hear, "Come on home." I could put a roof over her head, food in her stomach, and wrap her in the familiar comfort of my protection. I could put the broken pieces back together for her. But as I pictured it, I realized it would be a profound mistake. It would undo the entire, agonizing lesson. It would teach her that no matter how catastrophic the failure, Dad would always be there to erase the consequences. I would be rescuing the child, but sacrificing any chance for the woman to emerge. "I'm not going to abandon you, Chloe," I said, and I could hear the shift in her breathing. A small spark of hope. I had to extinguish it. For her own good. But I am not going to save you. Either. The silence on her end was now laced with confusion. What does that mean?" "I am logging into my bank account right now," I said, my voice finding a new, calm firmness. I swiveled in my chair and turned on my computer. I am going to wire $1,000 to your checking account. It should be there within the hour. That is enough to keep your room for another week. And to eat. And that is all. A week. Her voice was a thin thread of panic. Dad. I can't. What am I supposed to do after a week? The money will be gone. You're right. It will. I said, which is why. In the next 2 weeks, you are going to find a job. I don't care if it's waiting tables at a diner, or folding sweaters at the mall, or being a barista at a coffee shop. You are going to get a paycheck with your name on it. A paycheck that you earned. You will use that money to find a room to rent, or a small apartment with a roommate. You are going to learn what it costs to live a life. Chloe, not the life I gave you, but your own. The silence that followed was the heaviest, yet it was the sound of a terrifying new reality sinking in. This wasn't forgiveness. This was a challenge. My love for you is unconditional. Chloe, I said, my voice softening, letting the father in me speak. That will never, ever change. But my financial support is not unconditional. It must be. It has to be earned through respect, hard work, and responsibility. For 25 years, I made a mistake. I shielded you from every hardship. And in doing so, I robbed you of your own strength. This isn't a punishment. This is my last, best attempt to give you that strength back. This is your chance to become the woman, your mother, and I always knew you could be. I could hear her weeping softly on the other end. It wasn't the frantic crying from before. It was the quiet, exhausted weeping of someone who finally understood. Okay, Dad, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Okay, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. I said, I love you. Chloe, I love you too. Dad, she replied. And the words, for the first time in a decade, felt completely true. I ended the call. I sat in the glow of the monitor for a long time, the silence of the office wrapping around me like a blanket. It wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was a space filled with a fragile, terrifying, beautiful possibility. Finally, I stood and walked to the filing cabinet. My hand rested on the cool metal of the top drawer. I didn't pull it open. I didn't need to look at the receipts and contracts anymore. That chapter was written, its lessons paid for at a terrible cost. With a slow, deliberate movement, I pushed the drawer all the way in. It closed with a heavy, final thud, a metallic sound that seemed to absorb all the anger and pain of the past few weeks. A sound like a tomb being sealed, or a door closing on a life that no longer existed. I turned off the banker's lamp, plunging the office, my war room, into darkness. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the quiet, sleeping street. The moon cast long, skeletal shadows from the trees onto the perfectly manicured lawns. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if Chloe possessed the resilience to climb out of the hole she was in. She might fail spectacularly. She might call in 2 weeks, defeated, begging for me to break my promise. But she might not. For the first time in her life, she was truly the author of her own story. My battle hadn't been about winning a war against her. It had been about finally letting her go, truly and completely, so that she might, at last, to have a reason to find her own way home. All I had done was give her a compass. The journey was now hers alone, and all I could do was wait and hope.